2 weeks ago, we talked about the electricity and how you can use smart home or home automation to reduce your energy costs. Today, we will be talking about the heating. We'll start in a couple of seconds. Today, we are continuing with the second video in series on how to use smart home technology to reduce your energy costs. Last time, 2 weeks ago, we talked about electricity. This time, we are talking about the heating. There are tons of heating options, so unfortunately, I will not be able to cover everything. As you already know, my videos unfortunately get too long, and they really would be too long if I would try even to consider talking about everything. So today I will be mostly focusing on gas heating, heating by the radiators, or other systems that either use your local gas-produced hot water, or if you are using utility company to buy hot water for both heating and hot water usage. So let's start with the first item that you can replace, exchange in your apartment or house to start the automation journey. And this one is of course the room thermostat. Here I'm talking about the single room thermostat that usually apartments have, which is also usually located in the living room. This thermostat then, depending on the temperature in the living room, is heating all the other rooms. So what you usually had to do is set the living room thermostat to the temperature that you want that room to be, and in other rooms you had to turn on or off the valves depending on how well the radiators are heating that specific room. The easiest way to do that is to replace your current thermostat with either a relay or go out on the internet and buy replacement smart thermostat for your home that is either Zigbee or ZWave. Why I'm recommending Zigbee or ZWave, especially since I'm not using either one of them? Because they usually are powered via the batteries. Unfortunately, most of the gas heaters work in such a way that you have one pair of wires, and that pair of wires is then connected to the thermostat. Thermostat in itself has a relay, and this relay is controlling on and off state of this gas heater. So the problem can be powering of the relay. If you would be using Shelly, unfortunately you would also need to add one additional neutral wire to power the Shelly relay. So it adds to the complexity. Smart thermostats, Zigbee or Z-Wave, some of them are powered via the batteries, not all. But I need to mention one additional option for the smart thermostat. In 2 weeks I will be showcasing my system, and I'm using Tado Smart Thermostat. It was previously running in a same old-fashioned mode, meaning that it was providing on and off state for the gas heater. But this spring I replaced it with a new Violent combi boiler that allows me to use this eBus OpenTherm standard connectivity. And it opens a whole new world of heating options. Instead of providing just on and off state, I'm now using modulation. And that means that if, for example, this room here requires only 15% of the heat, this will be sent to the boiler, and boiler would not be running at 100%, instead it would reduce its power and only use the energy that is needed to heat this or some other room in the apartment. And as you can see, this can really reduce the cost of the gas. But let's go back to this case here. Okay, now let's imagine that you have replaced your analog thermostat with the relay, for example the one from the Shelly. How do you add it to Home Assistant so that Home Assistant knows that this specific relay is in effect thermostat? For this we have to use integration that's called generic thermostat. Let me show you how you can add it. Type climate, because Home Assistant needs to know that this is part of the climate integration or climate system inside Home Assistant. Next step is to specify platform, and this time it will be platform generic thermostat. We now need to name the thermostat. Usually you don't need to do that, but I prefer to name each of my integrations, especially if I have multiple. Name. Let's call it loft, since I don't have any loft thermostats. And now we have to specify two additional mandatory entities. First one will be heater. For this, we will be using that same switch or relay we just installed. For the purpose of this video, I will be adding a switch called bit. Let's pretend that this is a smart relay that is hooked up to my heating system. But we also need one additional thing, and that is the temperature. As currently the system knows what relay to turn on and off if it needs to heat, but it doesn't have any temperature sensors to check against. So let's add temperature sensor. These four lines, platform generic thermostat, name, the heater, which is the switch, and the target sensor, which is the temperature sensor representing that room, are the only four mandatory fields. For this to work, of course, what we have to do is we have to restart Home Assistant. While Home Assistant is restarting, let's check briefly the documentation for generic thermostat. As you can see here also we have four mandatory fields. But there are a lot more things that you can specify. For example, unique ID, which I also suggest because it helps in the long term. We can specify the minimum and maximum temperature. We can specify the target temperature. This is the initial target temperature. We can set if the device is just a heating device or it has also the cooling capabilities. Minimum cycle duration, which is something that I also recommend that you do. For example, you can specify that the device has to be in each state for minimum of 5 or 10 minutes. That means that it heats for 10 minutes, but then after the heating cycle it stops and waits additional 10 minutes before it starts to heat once again. It can help with the systems that slowly heat the room. For example, they emit heating energy, but it takes a bit longer for the heat to reach all the sensors in the room. Hot tolerance, keep alive, initial havoc state, away temperature, comfort temperature, home temperature, sleep temperature, and activity temperature. These are the presets, which are great if you have them to add them later on in the automations. System has now restarted. And by the way, did you know that there are a lot of options to add thermostats to Home Assistant? I think that this one here is the generic or plain thermostat in Home Assistant. But then we have option to use this mushroom card, this simple thermostat, but also some other options. Let's add mushroom climate card and select here loft. Save. Currently the temperature on the sensor is 23.5 and it's not heating. If we would start it to heat, the relay would turn on and it would start the boiler, gas boiler. And this is the simplest way on how to automate your existing gas heater with a smart relay. The question is how you can automate. For that, let me quickly add something to the YAML files. I've added a couple of presets because presets will allow us to easily automate tasks. So let's look at this. It's a simple thermostat available through HSCS card. Currently the temperature is 23.5 degrees centigrade. I've set it that I want 24.5 degrees centigrade, but the state is still turned off. Why? Each thermostat can be in the off and the heat state. When it's off, it will be ignoring the preset values. If I set it to heat, it would say that it is idle, and then it would change to heating. If I would to reduce the temperature that I want, it would then switch to idle state. But let's also talk about presets, because presets are a fun thing. You have preset none, preset away, which sets the temperature at predefined value. We have comfort, home, and sleep. This all can be automated. The easiest way to automate this is with the trackers. If nobody is in a zone home, we switch to off mode. If somebody arrives home, we switch to home. If everybody is sleeping or it's night, we turn the system to sleep mode, and after sleep we can switch to comfort mode. The settings, of course, are yours to play with. Match them with what you want your room or apartment or house to be heated at. Let's look at simple automation. We'll start with empty automation, add trigger, state of the zone home, changes to 0 for, let's say, 10 minutes. This means that when everybody leaves zone and it's been in that state for 10 minutes, action, call service, climate, set preset mode, choose entity, climate loft, and let's say that preset mode is away. Now, when everybody leaves the zone, it will turn the heating off. Of course, you can add more actions and add more generic thermostats or other thermostats if you have them. The opposite would be, of course, if the zone home changes from 0 to whatever number for 10 minutes, meaning that at least one person is at home, we would select the preset mode home. And these are the two simplest automations you can play with. But of course, for this, you need to have device trackers enabled in your system. The next step, and something that you can play with or add on top of this, is using the proximity integration. I will not be going into too much details there, because I already recorded video on the proximity sensor, and I will be leaving a link up here for that one. If you want to check out the proximity integration, go and check that video. But what proximity allows you? Device trackers can give you information on the state or whereabouts of a specific device or a person. Proximity has some additional fields. If we check the documentation, some of the examples that are mentioned in documentation is increase temperature as you near home or decrease temperature the further away from home you travel. For this, you can play in your automations with the state, which is the distance between the monitor zone, in our case home, and using this towards or away from. If person is moving away from, you can reduce the temperature. If the person is approaching or moving towards the home zone, you can increase the temperature. And by the way, I will also be talking about that in 2 weeks when I'll be talking about my setup, because I have that working with the Tada thermostat. But for me, I didn't have to create a single automation for that because Tado takes care of that one. Okay, but what about specific room temperatures? Well, actually for that you can use Smart Thermostatic Valves or Thermostatic Radiator Valves, depending on the company that is advertising. I myself have 3 of them. So I have a Smart Thermostat and also Smart Thermostatic Valves. What thermostatic valves enable you to do is something that you cannot do with a smart thermostat. And if they are working in a pair, it can be really efficient heating system. Let's look at one case. If you, for example, receive heat for your apartment from a utility company, meaning that you don't have your own heating system, the only way for you to control the heat is to use the valves. And I don't think that anybody likes to walk around the apartment whole day and whole night and close them and open them depending on what they need in a specific room and what specific point on time. For example, if you leave the apartment, yeah, the apartment would still be heating. But you can reduce the heat used if the utility company is measuring this utility that is consumed by using the smart thermostatic valves. There are tons of options for valves, but for this you also have to have radiators that are compatible with them. If not, you will have to call your plumber and replace the valve on the specific radiator. I myself, as I mentioned, am using Tada ones. A year or so ago I recorded video on the MOS Zigbee Smart Thermostatic Valve, a Kara one that was recently released that unfortunately didn't test, should also be pretty good option, but there is also option to use Shelly. It's very easy to install. You just have to remove your current thermostatic valve and replace it with this one. Hold the button to wake it up, go to your mobile phone, select the access point of the Shelly device and then access it. First thing that I do is I set up the IP address and of course the SSID for my home network. Restart it and it will be hooked to your existing Wi-Fi network. I will not be going into details about this one. But for Home Assistant integration, what you have to do is you have to enable CO IoT, type in here your IP address of Home Assistant and add port 5683. This is same for all of the Shelly devices, and I really do recommend that you go for CO IoT integration. No cloud is necessary for this one. The valve itself also has ton of additional options. Go through them and check if you want to change something. This one is showing us the state of the valve. It's currently at 0%, meaning that is fully closed. We have options all the way up to 100%. We can increase or decrease the temperature, see the temperature from the device itself, We have the battery information and the information about the weekly schedule, because I'm not using weekly schedule on that one. And of course, in Home Assistant you will have full control. One here will be the ability to control, to turn the heating on and off, to set the state, but also to change the percentage of the valve. And as I mentioned, if you do not have independent heating system, maybe this Shelly TRV will be a great option for you. The link to it will be also in the description of the video. If we add it via the simple thermostat card, we will once again see here the options. Currently it is 21.4 and it is set to heat. We can turn the heating off or turn the heating back on. We have option to play with the presets, and it performs like other thermostats are performing. I probably still haven't sold you the idea of Smart Thermostatic Radiator Valves. Let's look at this setup, and it's my home setup. I have 4 rooms that I'm tracking. Zita room and Luca room are kids' rooms. And I also have a living room and dining room. So let's look at our live schedule. My wife is mostly at home. If she is not at home, probably nobody else is at home, so we turn off the heating for whole apartment. But usually, during the weekdays when the school is on, my kids leave and they are not in their rooms for the next 6 to 8 hours, sometimes even longer. So what I created specific additional automations that are not run by the TADO system, but instead are run by the Home Assistant. Let's quickly look at them. There are 2 automations. One is called Luca Disable Heating When Out and the other one is Zita Disable Heating When Out. Let's look at the automation for Luca. When she leaves the home zone, we run the trigger ID stop. When she enters the home zone, we run the trigger ID start. Trigger ID stop runs the automation and it sets it in the off mode, meaning that even if the thermostatic radiator valves sees that it needs to heat the room, it is disabled. When she gets back home with the start ID in the actions, we do the opposite. We set it to auto, meaning that now we are leaving to the system to decide what temperature needs to be in that room. This is a pretty new automation in my home and I cannot tell you what is the influence and is it a good idea or bad idea. Probably I should add more control and some checks to see if the room temperature is not too cold. If it's too cold, ignore that she is not at home and start the heating cycle. By using these specific automations that regulate the temperature in specific rooms, you help up save on the energy. Smart home and home automation can really help you save the energy. But this is still not it. There are a ton of other options, and I really do hope that you will be joining me on the next stream this Saturday, because that stream will be dedicated to your ideas and suggestions on how to save on the heating in your smart home. Remember that in 2 weeks I will be also releasing a video on my own home setup system, on how I am using this new heater to heat my apartment, and my hopes and dreams to save a bit on energy. But also in 1 month I will be releasing a video on how, even if you are living in an apartment building, you can use solar energy to cut your own electricity bills. Fingers crossed, because still not all of the items have arrived and I haven't played with it, and I really do hope to create a video on it. Or if it fails, I'll be creating video on it how I failed to save up on the energy by using the solar power in my apartment. But let's get back to the heating. There are a lot of options for you. You can either use no-name relays to control your gas heaters. You can use brand names such as, for example, Netatmo, TADO or Nest, and all of them can be hooked up to Home Assistant. Or you can use third-party devices such as Zigbee or ZWave devices that can be controlled via the Home Assistant. If you want more granular heating control, don't forget to go for the Smart Thermostatic Valves. I've already mentioned that I've created video on the Bose one, and the link to that video will be up there. I also did show you that you can use the Shelly TRVs. But as I mentioned, also Aqara has them, Honeywell has them, a lot of companies have created smart TRVs. Check the forums, Check the Discords, check the ZHA or Zigbee to MQTT compatibility list to see if the one that you want to purchase works with Home Assistant. But I also need to thank all my YouTube channel members. They are helping me finance some of the projects. For example, this solar project. Thank you all for all of your support. And also thanks to each and every one of you who has watched, liked or subscribed to my channel. If you too want to support the channel, you can do so by becoming a YouTube channel member. Or if you want, you can also go to my merchandise store and buy something there. And I will be seeing you next time. Until then, bye bye and have fun.